The Journey Beneath the System by Swapnil Saurav.
7. Trapped. The friends stared at the powerful man in front of them, apprehensive. You must have questions. Feel free to ask, he encouraged them. Charvi took a shaky step to the front. What do you want from us? She asked. Good start. You see, I am a busy man. I require people who are willing to assist me, and I considered you'd be fitting for that role. As you have realized, I own some enterprises, and it is not possible for me to perform myself all the necessary tasks to remain operative, he explained. In this particular case, this is what I expect you to do. He pointed at a woman from his group of followers with his cane, and she took a folder from the bench behind him and approached Charvi and the others. You will find detailed instructions on your mission there, the businessman said as the woman gave each of them a printed document. I do not expect you to do the creative work, only to execute it. You want us to steal a work of art? Arav asked. I would not use that word. You must retrieve an item that was part of a transaction I already made with the person in charge of the museum. We need only justify its extraction and disappearance. You have the floor plans in your hands. I will provide you with the necessary equipment, and he assured me that there would not be any resistance if the job is done correctly, so this should not prove difficult to you, the businessman replied. But why did you choose us? Charvi asked him. The businessman's cane pointed at Bhavin. Oh, you can thank your friend over there. I saw his ego, his ambition and, most of all, his extreme ingenuity, and I knew it would be easy to lure him in. They all turned back to look at Bhavin, who was in a state of utter bewilderment. And then he kindly provided me with all the information I needed about the rest of you. You would make a fantastic team working for me. All that was left was to reach out to you separately to ensure your willingness to participate. And, as planned, you all accepted. Feyyaz interrupted him. I was forced. The businessman looked at him. Truly? Were you held at gunpoint? He inquired. He had a weapon. Feyyaz argued, pointing at the man he had met on the alley. Did you see it? The businessman insisted. Well, no, but did he exert any form of physical violence upon you? Feyyaz hesitated. Not really. Did he explicitly threaten to damage you in any way if you refuse to work for us? Moreover, were you not the one who said you could work? This time, Feyyaz directly looked down and walked backwards in silence until he was behind his friends. Then, all of this has been a lie? Bhavin asked, his voice full of dismay. Not all of it. From what I have seen and heard, I think that you do have talent. With the continued assistance of my organization, you can become real stars soon. You would not have gotten so far if that were not true, the businessman replied. He gave them a few seconds for his words to sink in. All you need to do is comply with my requests, and I will keep you under my wing for as long as you wish. There will be no closed doors in Shamavali to my allies. You mean your henchmen? Arav retorted. And if we refuse to comply? Are you going to kill us? Arav. Charvi whispered, clinging to his arm with an anguished look in her face. If you defy him like that, he might. The businessman made a dismissive gesture with his hand. Now, I am an efficient and economical man. I gain nothing from ending human lives unnecessarily, and so I do not enjoy it. Feyyaz jumped in again. But you killed someone the other day. The day we arrived, we heard gunshots near the hotel and... I killed someone? Are you certain of your accusation? The businessman's voice, usually calm, became suddenly very menacing. Feyyaz went quiet at once, unsure what made that man's aura so intimidating. The businessman continued speaking in his natural tone. I have been accused of many things. None have been proven so far. What other people say I do or claim to do in my name is not my problem. However, he made a pause and paced along the road to create suspense. All eyes were fixed on him. The same cannot be said for you. There is evidence that implicates the four of you in illegal activities. If that evidence were to reach the police, well, I'm sure you would not be fortunate. He smirked and shrugged. It's up to you. The tension in the air was palpable. For what seemed like an eternity, all of the people in the park stood in utter silence. We don't have a choice here, Ara finally said coldly. His eyes were full of suppressed anger. Well said, young man, the businessman replied. All of you already made your choices days ago, when you voluntarily agreed to work for me. But we were tricked. We didn't know. I didn't know it was for a dirty business. Bhavan shouted. There was disdain in the businessman's voice when he replied. Oh, but you did know it was something bad. At some point, you realized the things you were asked to do were not entirely ethical. All of you did. But you told yourselves that it was all for your dreams, and now, look where your dreams have brought you. He set the wooden cane on the bench, took off his sunglasses, folded them carefully and stored them in the inside of his elegant jacket. Then he walked up to them. Nevertheless, there is still hope for you. Accept what your life has turned into, embrace this new path and you will reach glory. Fight against it. His dual-colored eyes darted up at them, and this time, they could feel the might of his direct glare. And crumbled to dust. Charvi, Bhavan and Feyyaz crossed the museum stealthily. It was already far into the night, and everything was dark. Can you see it? Bhavan whispered. There it is, Feyyaz pointed out. They slowly approached the room that contained the painting that was their target. Stop! Charvi exclaimed quietly. The two men turned and looked at her. What are we going to do? Are we really going to follow that buffoon for the rest of our lives? She asked. The friends stared at one another. It's either that or our lives. Feyyaz said, disheartened. But this is never going to end, Charvi countered. If we do this, he'll have us do another thing later. And then something else. He'll own us, she said. But you heard him. If we refuse to work for him, we're doomed. He's just too powerful to run from, Feyyaz replied. I think we should do it, Bhavan intervened. What? Charvi and Feyyaz asked. Yeah. He has kept his promises so far, hasn't he? He hasn't harmed any of us, and he's been helping us with our careers. He replied. Feyyaz frowned. Well, he said he'd help you too, Feyyaz. Now that we know who he is, I think we can ask him for more than he's given us. He's probably been testing us because we're newbies, but if we earn his approval, we'll surely go up in rank or something, Bhavan elaborated. Charvi stared at him, alarmed. Bhavan continued speaking. And he's not the worst guy in Shyamavali. I watched the news the other day. There are others who are much worse than him. At least, if we're with him, he'll keep us safe from the rest. It was too much. Charvi raised her hand and slapped Bhavan across the face. Are you listening to yourself? She asked, raising her voice. Bhavan rubbed his cheek and then stood as straight as he could, facing Charvi. We came here to become stars. Isn't that what you want? He challenged her. We still can do it. He can give us everything. At what cost, Bhavan? Charvi questioned him. Don't you see what we're turning into? Is it worth sacrificing our principles just for fame and money? Amidst their argument, they didn't notice Feyyaz walking into the room and unhanging the painting from the wall. Hey! Feyyaz called. They stopped fighting and turned towards him. His legs were trembling. I can't hear this discussion any longer. You're my best friends. We are like family. And if we are going to hate ourselves or each other forever because of this, then. He shut his eyes tightly and lifted the painting above his head. What the? Bhavan started. Feyyaz, don't. Charvi cried out. But it was too late. The painting was already in the air, describing an arc that ended on top of a spear-like sculpture. They all watched the painting land and get pierced through the structure, which fell to the side and clattered against the floor. The scandal it made was only surpassed by a high-pitched sound that began echoing deafeningly all over the place. You set off the alarm. Charvi screamed. Run! The three friends rushed through to the escape route that was in the instructions. Why did you do that? Bhavan yelled at Feyyaz. There's no time for fighting. We have to get out of here. Charvi replied. They ran across the passageway that led to a secret exit, followed by the noise of the alarm. Now, the only thing that they could see was the scarce light coming through the edges of the doorframe. Open the door. One of them yelled in the darkness. It's not opening. Another replied. They struggled for a couple of seconds in panic. Finally, the door opened, and they were out on the back alley. Where's Arav? Feyyaz asked. He was supposed to be here, guarding the escape route, Charvi replied. Maybe he heard the alarm and fled? Bhavan suggested. He'd never do that. Charvi said, indignant. Bhavan changed his statement. All right, maybe he went in to look for us. The door was closed. It's more likely that he's further ahead, answered Feyyaz. The friends started walking through the alley. There he is! Exclaimed Charvi when they saw Arav's figure disappearing behind a corner. They quickly moved to meet him, but what they did not expect was that the moment they turned, they would find much more than just their friend. Arav was standing with his arms crossed behind his back, being held by a big, strong thug. Other similar men swiftly grabbed Charvi, Feyyaz, and Bhavan, and placed them next to Arav in the same position. I heard the alarm, and I knew something had gone awry. Indeed, I see you are not carrying what you went to look for. The businessman stepped from behind his other henchmen and approached them slowly. The friends didn't reply, there was no point in explaining, and no excuses would save them. Did you think that you could just escape? That I would not be overseeing the operation? Is this your first formal assignment? Honestly, I expected you to be smarter. Well, at least the two of you, he said, pointing at Arav and Charvi. Then he turned towards Bhavan. I knew you were a complete fool, but I was hoping your survival instinct would push you to make the right decision. Even so, you have all disappointed me. He shook his head. Now, what am I to do with you? The police are already on their way to search all the area. Should I hand you over to them, or should I find another way for you to return the investment I have made on you? He began pacing back and forth facing the four of them. Bhavan looked at his friends' faces. As usual, Arav masked his emotions with a completely neutral face, but Bhavan could notice the extra tension on his jaw by him gritting his teeth. Feyyaz had closed his eyes and had an expression of agony. Charvi's was one of absolute terror. Their eyes met, and Bhavan felt guilt hit him like a ton of bricks. This is all my fault. If I hadn't been so stupid and naive, none of this would have happened. Now my friends are all in danger. All because of me. Despair slowly crept into Bhavan as his mind was filled with those thoughts. At last, the businessman stopped in front of Charvi. For example, I am sure this pretty lady could make a lot of money in other ways. He said sardonically, lifting a hand to caress her terrified face. Several things happened at almost the same time. Don't touch her. Arav snapped. With all his force, he lunged his head at the businessman, who was close enough to take the headbutt to his face. The businessman stepped back and brought a hand to his bleeding nose as the henchman began beating Arav down. Charvi screamed next to him, and the man who was holding her put a hand on her mouth while Freya struggled against his captor. Bhavan watched it all happen in slow motion, frozen at first. This is all my fault. His distressed mind went out of control, unable to think in such a situation. His body acted by itself. Overcoming his fear, he rammed his head back into the man holding him, who loosened his grip for just an instant. He took that chance to release himself and, using his agility, he pounced at the source of all of their problems. The fedora flew into the air. The businessman, who had become temporarily dazed due to Arav's hit, was unable to see Bhavan coming, and they both fell. But when they hit the ground, a cracking sound sent chills down Bhavan's spine. He lifted his face and saw a pool of blood extending from the back of the other man's head. His eyes looked empty, and the broken sunglasses lay next to his unmoving body. The businessman was dead.